This is a fit recovery coach. She is our newest coach that has been with us for a couple of years or maybe a year. I feel like it's been at least 1 year, if not longer. She has, I think, more than 3 years alcohol free. Now, Dr. Tressa, she got alcohol free and healthy and repaired her brain and repaired her liver and grew her hair back, as you can see, after she found fit recovery. So she is one of the coaches, along like Tana is too. They're both coaches for fit recovery that actually got alcohol free using fit recovery. Her before picture, she also had cancer, but that was, they just came out. The Surgeon General is supposed to now, was recommending that they should put labels on alcohol now, like, hey, known to cause at least this many types of cancer. And so she was a severe alcohol use disorder case. And she also had cancer around that time. Then she found fit recovery. And as you can see on the picture on the right, the fit recovery method works, starting with biochemical restoration. This is still my favorite definition of addiction until I find a better one. I'm going to use this. Dr. Gabor Maté says, quote, addiction is a complex psychological, emotional, physiological, neurobiological, social, and spiritual process. It manifests through any behavior in which a person finds temporary relief or pleasure and therefore craves, but that in the long term causes them or other negative consequences. And yet the person refuses or is unable to give it up. End quote. The three hallmarks of addiction are: one, short-term relief and pleasure. The key word here is short-term. Short, all the words are keywords, but highlight that short-term relief and pleasure, instant gratification, instant pleasure, instantaneous relief of stress, instant euphoria, and therefore craving. The number two hallmark of addiction, long-term suffering for oneself or others. So in the short term, the person gets relief and pleasure, but then in the long term, it's suffering for them and or others. And then number three, an inability to stop. Let's actually go. And this is all, by the way, from the book The Myth of Normal by Dr. Gabor Maté and then Daniel Maté, his son. Two things to note right away. First, my definition omits disease, which is not to say that it must exclude it. Most illnesses are best understood as complex processes manifesting a person's entire life, rather than discrete things in themselves. In the end, as with many conditions, calling addiction a disease may capture relevant aspects of it without coming close to explaining the phenomenon, let alone granting us a workable pathway to healing it at its source. Second, this definition is not restricted to drugs. The same drive that often devotes itself to substances can activate any number of behaviors, from compulsive sexual roving to pornography, from inveterate shopping to the internet, both of which habits I know well. Yeah, he was addicted to buying, I think it was classical, all this really rare classical music CDs back in the day. And yeah, he had a pretty severe addiction to shopping for those particular things. And he had all the signs of the addictive process. From gaming to gambling, from any sort of binge eating or drinking to purging, work to extreme sports, from relentless exercising to compulsive relationship seeking, from psychedelics to meditation, the issue is never the external target, but one's internal relationship to it. I like that so much. It's really about not the substance or the behavior, but the person's subjective individual relationship. Okay, moving on. Here's the four root causes of addiction, cravings, and relapse. This comes from Dr. Charles Gant from the book End Your Addiction Now, the proven nutritional supplement program that can set you free. Number one is poor nutrition. Look at that. The number one root cause of addiction, poor nutrition. More specifically, you can put in parentheses past nutrition. This would be poor food choices, malabsorption, So you're not absorbing the nutrients well from the food. And then maldigestion. That is not even the end of it. There's also the soil that the food is grown in, the fruits and vegetables and the grains, etc., plants, and a lot of the food that the animals eat is from these totally depleted in minerals soils. So the effects of the long-term effects of the more and more industrialized, technologicalized farming and agriculture practices stripped, really, really stripped the mineral quality, density from our soil. Therefore, food 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, even 40 years ago, even 30 years ago, but especially 80 to 100 years ago, the food was so nutritious. It had really high nutrient density, meaning the foods had much higher amounts of vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, uh, probiotics, omega-3 fatty acids, all these wonderful nutrients that, as you'll discover coming up, are some of the best things to fight off this poor nutrition and thus the root cause of addiction, alcohol cravings, and alcohol relapse, etc. Then number two, stress, chronic stress and acute distress and eustress. Not just distress, but eustress can even, it's very common for positive stress. So even me setting up to do these Thursday and Monday night events on Zoom, it's like a tiny amount of, maybe 1 or 2% of positive, eustress. Say, for instance, I'm speaking in an event which is coming up in when is that? I think the end of April, the last couple days of April, I think it is, or maybe no, I think it's the last few days of March and then into April. But I am speaking at an event on stage, and that's going to be not 1 or 2% eustress. That's going to be way up there, 50%. It's going to be exciting and stressful. I'm not saying it's going to cause me to have alcohol cravings or a relapse back into addiction, but I'm just saying that don't forget positive stress is stress too on the body. It's not nearly to the same degree though. So this is acute stress is, a panic attack, or you have a day where you have so much to get done in one day. Let's say there's a lot of people that need you for things. You have appointments of many different types, whether in person or on the phone or a combination of both or on the computer. And, one of the biggest causes of stress is the feeling that there's too much to do and not enough time to get it all done. And then where's our time to reward ourselves too afterwards? Like there has to be a balance of doing and being, working and resting and playing and meditating and healing and, this nice variety. But to make it real black and white, work and rest. So then that would be acute stress. And then chronic stress is when that's just doesn't go away. You have this never-ending feeling. And that was just one example where you have too much to do and not enough time. Another example of chronic stress is where a person's just adrenal system's burned out, where they maybe they had a couple acute stress events and then they had a couple of poor nights of sleep, and then maybe they lowered their immune system and they got sick. And then when they got back to work after being sick, they were so behind that it led to so much stress and they never were able to catch up. And they've just had chronic stress for months and months and months, where the amygdala is just firing off cortisol and norepinephrine and epinephrine, and they're not downshifting their upregulated hyperarousal nervous system. They're not getting the downshift enough to get into the parasympathetic nervous system rest and digest drive of mode of human being and give themselves the rest, maybe dial down the caffeine, take a week off work, take a week off technology, go to Hawaii. I realize this is so much easier said than done. Go to Hawaii for a 10-day vacation where you get massages and tons of great seafood and other foods. Lots of sunlight. Number three is toxins. This could be all the nasty stuff they put in the foods, from food dyes and artificial colorings and flavors to the herbicides and fungicides. And side means death that they put in the soil and they put around the plants, the farmers, so they can grow more and make more money, make more profits. But our bodies have to digest these and our bodies have to, process these toxins. They're literally toxins to our brain and body. And our bodies, if we're under pretty good health, average, reasonable health, and we only have a little bit of toxic intake on the regular, then we're able to process that. That's one of the functions of the body, is being able to dispel of, to neutralize and dispel of these toxins. But the allostatic load, the total toxic burden your liver's under, your brain is under, your cellular metabolism is all under. The greater degree of that load, quantity and quality of this toxic load, all these different types of toxins, and each one of their quantity and potency all synergize together. And then if somebody is doing that toxification to their brain and body repeatedly over the span of months and especially years, then they're going to have chronic illness or chronic alcohol addiction. Or chronic alcohol addiction could even cause this. As you can see, alcohol use disorder exacerbates all of these. It may give the person momentary, short-term relief or pleasure, but in the long term, if somebody keeps doing it, drinking alcohol, a toxin, it's number three right here. Alcohol is a toxin. It really is. Fits the definition more than almost any other toxin. And so once somebody has become addicted to alcohol, let's say they're addicted for 2 years, well, now their genetics are going to be more messed up. They're going to have heavily toxified themselves. That is going to have caused a lot of stress. And that almost invariably, nearly invariably, leads to poor nutrition. I've very rarely seen a person that has a drinking problem that also eats really, really rich nutrition. It's almost unheard of. They're almost opposites. And then finally, number four, and then other toxins, things like heavy metals. Those are really bad. Pollutants in the air. The people that live in certain areas of Japan where they're close to or where the atomic bombs went off. There's just so many types of toxins that are in even household cleaning products, household hair products, soaps, and body washes. A lot of these things have toxins. And then number four is genetic predisposition. The latest research that I'm aware of is that genetics have to do with up to 60%, okay? Up to 60% of whether or not a person comes down with alcohol use disorder or another substance or behavior addiction has to do with their genetic blueprint, which genetics are not only that they have, but are upregulated, are turned on.